good to see your face. I feel like I never see you anymore.
No, you don't. Who knows where I am? Somewhere over some part of the country on an airplane.
Where in the world is Tiffany?
Exactly. No one knows. Definitely not my family.
Annual planning has taken Tiffany captive, and I no longer see her.
Yeah. But we're here. We're here.
We're here. Yeah. And we have a good topic today.
I know. I'm excited.
I'm glad you brought this topic up because I am feeling a little regret from our podcast we recorded last week, or that went out last week, with Ravi Rajani. So in the Ravi Rajani podcast, for those of you that listened, if you have not, go back. It's one of our best. Ravi and I talked, and Tiffany talked about strategy, the word of strategy and strategic, and what it means to be strategic. And I got on a soapbox pretty aggressively.
You never do that, Kel. You never get on a soapbox.
Never. And my soapbox was that I think leaders use "you need to be more strategic" as a cop-out. I'm not taking that back.
Yeah.
But I think there is more to it. And I think part of it is, as leaders, we don't have a great definition of strategic.
Okay.
And we don't, defining it's part of the problem, but like the worst part of the problem is I don't know if we know what that means. Like if you're looking at someone, what are you looking for that means they're strategic?
Yes.
So we're going to talk all about that today. Today is about defining strategic, and Tiffany and I are going to talk about, from our own perspectives, what we look for someone that we say, oh, they are very strategic in their business. How you lead with strategy, how you think about strategy, and if you're someone who has been told you just need to be a little bit more strategic, we'll talk about some strategies to make you more strategic. Oh, look at that.
Yeah. Strategies for strategies. We're going to double down on this word. Ravi should be proud of us, actually, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you would. I think you would. Okay, Tiffany, how do you define strategy?
I think, well, there are two, this is a double-edged sword. There is strategy, which is a plan that has defined outcomes that lead you to some sort of long-term end goal or direction that you're trying to drive. You're thinking about the bigger picture and how you are defining the work you need to go do. I think being strategic is constantly asking yourself if the work, constantly maybe is a strong word, throughout the day, when you carve out the time to do it, you're asking yourself, is what I'm doing in service of whatever that long-term goal or plan is? And if not, can I justify that I still need to get it done? And it's breaking up the time between doing all the tactical stuff and making sure you are tying it or leading it into that long-term strategy that exists for whatever you're working on, your business, your family, your podcast. It could be any of those things.
I agree with you.
Great. That's why we do a podcast together.
So we do have some opposing ideas. Don't worry. This isn't going to just be us agreeing with each other. The thing that I think is missing from this is I actually think, and I'm seeing this now as I coach individuals, is people are often more strategic than they come across. Mm-hmm. And they are doing the thinking, the strategic thinking that we want them to. But they lack in a couple areas. The ability to articulate their strategic thinking, their ability to programmatize their strategy. And I think some of it's just their EQ of when they should bring and talk at that level.
Yeah. I also think a lot of people that get caught in this titling of not being strategic are often in what some might define as like a middle management. You're not in an executive level, but you have people underneath you, and you're not seen as strategic because you're not seen as leading your team with strategy is often what people are trying to say. And I think especially in the RevOps world, a lot of people fall into this. We're doers by nature. Like you want to get your hands dirty and do the thing that fixes the problem. You don't care about like sticking your head up and being like, hey, look at me over here. Look at what I'm doing. It feels like very self-promoting, but in reality, like that's the strategy that's often missing when you're being told you're not being strategic, is exactly what you just described.
And it's because they're lacking the larger story to why that hands-on keyboard work and the doing of the work brings the organization to the next level.
Yeah. I think that is really true. I'm curious from your perspective, Kelly, and I don't know this answer from you. Have you ever been called not strategic in a role that you've been in? Is that a feedback that you've gotten?
I'll be honest, I haven't.
But I have.
Oh, you have? Okay, tell me about it.
Okay. I have prior life several years ago now at this point. I was given feedback pre-COVID. So like, yeah, more than several years ago. I was given feedback that I wasn't strategic in the role that I was doing. It was really frustrating for me. I felt like I was working really hard. We were moving all these things along. And similar to our conversation with Ravi in your soapbox, I didn't get any other guidance besides that. It was just, you're not strategic. That was it. That was the end of the conversation. What I realized through self-discovery and the replacement of the person who I rolled into and getting a new leader who was much better at articulating these things is that I was just stuck in the weeds trying to execute my way through the strategy without doing any of the communication, or not even communication. So backing it up, not just communication, but the pre-communication of the work I was doing to say, this is what I'm going to do. That was the key that I was missing. I could talk about what I had done. I sounded reactive because someone would say like, well, this is a huge issue. And I'd say, oh, no. We're doing this, this, and this. And here's what we're doing to fix that. I came off as reactive, even though I had a plan the whole time. And so that was the aha moment that I really had to come to on my own, though, over the course of maybe a maternity leave and 18 months of time.
So interesting. And I think you're not alone in that is one of the biggest things that catches people off of that lack of pre-communication.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the weeds and you're working on a project and you have that vision, oftentimes sitting down and putting that vision on paper is difficult. But even harder is, I don't know if I've looked at your calendar. Your calendar is so scary. I remember those corporate days. I'm sorry. Trying to get people to listen to your strategy and find time and space to listen to what you're doing next.
Yeah.
Is really hard. And if you're dealing with some insecurities and some imposter syndrome,
Sure. Yeah.
requesting the meeting with more senior individuals to talk about a strategy where there's potential for them to poke holes in it, it's really easy to just have your strategy in your head, maybe talk about it to your team, maybe your manager kind of knows, and then just go execute on it and execute it on it well.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to lose your job if you're executing well.
Yeah. I have a framework that I rolled out to my team at my current job that I poke on a regular basis, and it's called Say, Do, Say. My expectation is that you say what you're going to do. Hold yourself accountable. Say it in multiple forums. Be very clear about it. Do it. That's the most important part. To your go do what you said you were going to do, and then say it again. Celebrate what you did. Show that it happened. Remind people you said you were going to do it to begin with. And I think it's not something that just I need to own as an executive over my team. I want everyone in my team to be able to do that as a skill across the board. And I think it really leans into what we're talking about here as far as needing to get in front of things. But all three of those components are so important to having that strategic lens in what you're doing.
Do you know who also really likes the Say, Do, Say framework? Daisy, your dog.
Yeah, you hear her.
Sorry if you're hearing that in the background. Casey's
Yeah.
excited. Casey's very cute. Okay, Say, Do, Say. That is so simple. And it's something that you can, this is my trick to all things when I'm trying to implement something new. I put a sticky note on my computer. That's a good one. You write Say, Do, Say on a sticky note, put it on your computer. So when you're talking to anyone, you remember, I have to say what I'm doing. So I'm going to throw another framework out at you that I feel is very simple to use. I might have talked about this on the podcast before, but one thing that I'm thinking through is, how do you do the say? How do you actually communicate the say? Because that's really important too. And the method I use for that is a score. What is the situation? Okay. What are the challenges we're facing? Okay. What is our opportunity? And what is my recommendation? Okay. So it's got the situation, the challenges. So you're coming in and you're not just saying, I'm going to do this and it's going to do this. Yeah. You're saying, here's why I'm thinking about this. That's really strategic. We've got issues. I'm seeing this in the data. The more data you can use, the better, obviously. Yes. You talk about the opportunity. If we solve this problem, here's the KPIs we can hit. Yeah. Here's the business objectives we can hit. Here's our opportunity. And here's my recommendation on how I'll execute this. And it's such an easy way. It can be 4 sentences. It can be 20 pages long, depending on how big the project is. But it's a really easy way to communicate what you're doing.
I think back to I love that. I'm thinking back to our conversation we had with Jackie Leahy around the how RevOps can serve the CFO, and kind of the framework she was talking about around how you really think about the dollars and cents of all the projects you're doing. And I think what's so key in that opportunities area of what you just described is to describe the impact really well in numerical values. We often talk about like productivity is going to be better and the sales reps will be happier or whatever it might be. You really have to drill down to the core impact and on the bottom line or top line as much as you can. That's where like people really key in, and you can get to really crisp executive summaries of the challenge is costing us this, the opportunity will have an impact of this. That's why it's my recommendation.
It's the same thing we teach salespeople. It is the same concept that we teach our sellers, and we just have to internalize it and use it internally. And the only other thing I can add to that is if you're in this situation where you feel like you're delivering a really strong message, but it's not resonating, the question I always want to ask you is, did you personalize it enough? If you're talking to a marketing person about a RevOps KPI, they might not care.
Yeah.
And so how do you translate whatever the business metric is you're talking about to their world? So translate it to lead gen, translate it to some other metric that's very important that they are measuring so that they can see how it flows to their world, because suddenly then they pay attention. You don't always pay attention. You should, but you don't always pay attention to all the other things that are going on in the business because there's just too much to pay attention to.
Yeah. I think the other thing that happens, both cross-functionally potentially like you're describing there, but also you often are working for someone that doesn't know how to support your strategy. They might not be as strategic themselves either. And I think that often shows up in two different ways. Again, cross-functionally or maybe a less mature leader is they either want to put their thumbprint on whatever you're working on. They feel the need that they need to contribute something above and beyond what you've said because they need to prove their worth in the room. Or they want to take it and run with it themselves. They need to take that, especially in a management situation. Like they need to take that idea and package it up differently, and they know how to spin it, or they know how that executive is going to lean in. And one of the things I was talking to our chief product officer at a happy hour this week in Boston, we were chatting about something tangential to this, and she was saying she was in consulting previously, and you kind of have to leave room for the person you're presenting it to for where you want their opinion to land. You know that they need to make their mark. You know that they need to have input into the strategy itself. And so knowing your audience, and if you have one of those blockers when you go in to present a strategy along those lines, especially if it's a manager that's maybe more on the micromanager side of things, leaving that designed space of like, and this is where I need your help or want your opinion. Make sure that you've done your homework. You still show up as strategic, but give them that lens to then feel like they were needed and they were important. And that's going to like increase the likelihood of you being well received in that meeting or that conversation.
Yes, yes, and yes. Oh my gosh, love that so much, because that is one of the things that people don't believe something until it's their idea. They might have heard it from other people. And when I say their idea, meaning they're completely on board and they feel inside internally that it's the right thing for the business. But a lot of times that means that they're also thinking strategically about it and making slight changes here and there. So,
okay. Question for you, Kelly. So you're listening, you're doing all these things. You've got the frameworks nailed, your do say, you're really thinking about your score and the framework of how you're building your presentation. You've gotten over your imposter syndrome and you're making the time on the calendar, and you're still getting feedback that you're not strategic, that it's not enough. And it's still this like bland, you're not strategic enough. What questions do you start asking around to help yourself frame that better so that you can overcome it?
Great question. So the question is, what questions do you ask when you get told you're not strategic enough? The thing that I think is so hard is to define strategic. And so don't ask them the definition. Ask them what they would do differently.
Ooh, okay. I love that.
So give them the opportunity to share in this situation, what would you have done differently? Because then a lot of times as a leader, you're scared's the wrong word. You want the individuals on your team to have their own ideas and push their own things forward. And so you don't want to, at least from my perspective, I don't want to stomp on their ideas. And so I often don't say what I would have done differently unless I'm directly asked. But that I do think puts it on them to really articulate what they would have done differently. I think the thing that you're going to get stuck on is if it's not a specific project, it's too broad.
Yeah.
And this is, so I'm going to go back and ask this question to you, but I want to hit one thing really quick. You have got to productize and name your projects. And I know you've gotten this feedback before, Tiffany, or advice before.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I have gotten this advice too. It was game changing for me when I got
Yep.
this advice. And I since did it around everything. I had my teams do it around everything. Create a name, project optimize. I don't care, whatever it is, and make yourself associated with that project, because people remember projects and remember names, but they don't remember that you updated the Salesforce fields to be more streamlined.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question back to you that you asked me, which is, if you get told you're not strategic, you're trying, but you're not there, what do you ask your manager?
So I'm going to take a page from Ravi's book, and we talked
Okay.
about this on the episode as well with him, but I would frame it as, what would it have looked like for me to be strategic? What would it have looked like? So I'm not asking how, it's slightly different from your answer, because I'm not asking what you would have done, leader ABC. What take would you have done? I don't want to mirror what you would have done. I want to understand what the end result would have looked like that was different, where you didn't have this feedback. And I think that that gives you a little more wiggle room outside of a project to have the conversation, right? You come out of a meeting and someone says you're not strategic, or you're in your annual review and someone says you're not being strategic. And you can say, what would that have looked like for me to be strategic? And you can it's a way of asking someone in an open-ended storytelling question way, what did they envision the results being? I think, and I fear for a number of people, what you end up getting is not a great answer. You maybe don't know as a leader what you're really asking for them, and you're going to stump someone. But I think that as the individual asking for that, if that's the road you end up going down, don't let them flounder. That's going to lower their opinion of you. Like you're in this like weird dance where you're getting feedback that you're not good enough, really, at the end of the day, is what they're trying to say. And if you're just putting yourself in it as an adversary, you're not going to win any battles. So I think if that's the road you end up down, then you say, I'd love to map out for you a few other ways I think I could have done better, and then brainstorm with you which one of those better meets your version of being strategic, and then maybe use that as a way so I can understand how I can improve. And you have to stop that stumble that might start to happen. But I like the idea of kind of not asking what they would do, but asking what it would have looked like if you had been strategic.
That's a really good point. The other thing I think you can ask, and I've done this before, not on strategic, but on other things, is who in the organization do you think does this really well?
Well, yeah.
I want to learn, and I'd love to learn from someone maybe at a similar level to me, maybe one level up, that does this really well. I'd love to go take them to coffee and talk to them about how they do things differently. Who would you recommend that being? It's often easier for a leader to say, yeah, easy.
Go look like this person. Yeah. I want you to behave like that person over there.
I can't tell you what I like about that person, but I know that that person does it well.
Yeah. I think another way to ask that is, what books have you read that you think would resonate well with this issue? Resources are a great way to ask this question. And I think in both cases, whether you follow up from like a mentorship or even just a coffee chat, or you read a book, coming back and saying, these are the takeaways I got and things I'm going to try. Again, back to that say, do, say. Say what you got out of it and what you're going to try to do, and then follow up with doing those things, and then saying, I want to check in before this feedback comes up again. Like, I just did XYZ. How would you rank that as far as being more strategic? Do you think we're moving in the right direction? Like, you can still apply that framework, I think, when you're doing feedback and follow up.
Feedback is disappointingly mostly given at annual reviews, which you said. We as leaders should be better at it. I know some leaders are. I imagine, Tiffany, knowing your leadership style, you are better at giving feedback more often than not. But for those of you that are in a role where you have a leader that's just giving you feedback in your annual review, the other thing you need to ask is, who needs to know I'm strategic for me to move up in the business? I think in go-to-market, oftentimes you're so reliant on, you think, your boss thinking you're strategic to move up. But for those of you that are not involved in the review process, it's usually a group decision. Yeah. These are usually bigger than your boss, and you're usually calibrating individuals across the board within the organization. And so they might tell you, hey, marketing really needs to think you're strategic here. It's RevOps that really needs to think you're strategic. And while they're not saying a person's name, they're going to give you guidance on maybe a part of the organization that you need to lean into more than you have.
And I think that brings up the other point that I think is really important in this strategy conversation is it's not just what you're doing, but it's the brand that you carry. Your
Mhm.
personal brand becomes so important in these conversations. And if somewhere along the way, someone internally has branded you as not strategic, you have to think about that as a brand problem. And it's not something you can just work your way out of. You have to go sell your way out of it. You have to go tackle those cross-functional partners and build those relationships. And it doesn't have to mean that you do a project for each of them and prove
Yeah,
like the work that you can do. It's building interpersonal connections and trust between people so they can see how you operate and what you're thinking in a day-to-day basis. So you can start to repair or change that brand or that narrative that's out there. So I do think that awareness that as people, we carry brands is really important when you're getting feedback that's you're not strategic enough.
absolutely. One other thing we haven't talked about yet is strategic people are really good at looking around corners. But oftentimes, you might get told you're not strategic when you're looking around corners because you're coming with problems and not solutions.
Mm-hmm. A huge pitfall.
Huge pitfall. And I've been in this place where you're looking around corners and there's 10 different things that people should be thinking about and worried about that no one's worried about. And you just want to scream from the rooftops, like, we need to fix this. Let's go do this. This is bad for the business. But actually what you need to do is write a score on a project that you're going to create to address those issues, but you're not bringing them up as issues. You're bringing them up as recommendations and opportunities.
Yeah. And I think another lens to that of being strategic, and I think back to my first week at my current company, my then boss was like, this project is the biggest thing I need you to focus on, most strategic thing in the business. It was like launching new products was a problem. We've barely launched we're launching a bunch of stuff right now. We have barely launched anything in the 3 years in between. It was not our biggest problem. But within 3 days, I was raising flags on another issue. And I was like, whoa, like something is really far off. Like I'm getting these numbers. Am I wrong? Am I seeing something wrong? And looking back at that, I was so new in the organization that I didn't have my wits about me to like come up with a recommendation yet. I was still trying to figure out what I didn't know. But I think that putting together, like leaning into a team of cross-functional people and bringing people together to solve a problem, it doesn't just have to be you to be strategic. You raising your hand before you have that strategy and saying, hey, I see a problem. I'm rating it as urgent because I think it has top line or bottom line impacts to our business. I'm new or unfamiliar or whatever the reason, it not well versed in all the areas. Let's have a problem solving meeting and formatting that meeting in a way that you come out with that score framework. I really like that as a group to present. And then I think you can lead that. You set up the group, you can lead the conversation. You don't have to leave people behind in that strategy or that recognition. But that is one way when you often feel like you've looked around a corner and you see things, but you're not sure how to solve them. You kind of like leave them there because you're getting the feedback like, what do I do with this information you're getting me? You can still take that step to build that cross-functional kind of tiger team that helps you solve it.
That also just elevates your cross collaboration role in general, because oftentimes when you raise these issues, someone's on the defense in that situation. But if you're not, if you're going with questions, genuine curiosity on what's happening, then you're more likely to get answers, honest answers, and you problem solve it together. And then you're looked at as a partner versus
Yeah.
someone who's going to drag you through the mud.
Today I've been building a GPT, in our enterprise GPT I'm building a concept around a meeting framework where you solve these difficult problems where people are
Oh,
pointing fingers
nice.
otherwise. But then I'm building a GPT to go alongside of it that I've told to read all these books and to have all these like first principle problem solving approaches. But its goal is when you give it a problem, you vent to it like we do, all of us do to chat GPT, you vent to it, it helps you reframe how to run a meeting and who to invite to it and how to challenge the biases that you're seeing. So it takes that frustration you're feeling of not understanding how to get to an answer, because a lot of times it is blocked by people, and helps build you a framework of how to go run a meeting, time blocked and everything on how to get to an answer and an outcome that you can move yourself forward.
I
So
would
that's kind
like
of
this
fun.
GPT if you
Yeah.
could give me that,
Yeah.
whatever you use to build
I'll,
that.
I'll,
That would
I'll
be
give
great.
you my framework, my schema around it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to
So
build one. Yeah.
oh, I don't know either. You're going to have to show me.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about a lot for the individual who's getting the feedback. What is your advice for a manager or a leader who sees someone on their team that they just needs to be slightly more strategic for you to lean on them in a different way? What is the coaching you give to the leader?
I think that in all cases, forget pips. In all cases, you should have clarity in what is needed from you to improve. Whether you're improving to get promoted, or you're improving because you're on a performance plan, or you're just on a journey to improve and you don't know what that outcome is, there should be clear steps on what that is. And if you as a leader can't define them, then you have not given real feedback. You have complained to your employee that you don't like them. My guidance to my team is we need to be very clear with what those steps are. And those steps may lead an individual outside of the organization in both regrettable and non-regrettable ways. We may open up their doors to an opportunity that they can't grow at that level on our team, and we've sent them on a path. That's great for you as a brand, as a leader, if you can grow people like that. So let's not worry about that as an outcome. Just think about the steps that are needed to get there and examples that can happen. And so my coaching back to my team and my leaders is always been, don't tell me when you come to me and tell me you're frustrated with someone, what is our plan to get them there? And what is the realistic timeline? And you tell me, like, if you're making stuff up and they're not going to be able to be successful on that timeline, let's figure out something else, because that's not fun for anyone. Like, I don't want to end up in a situation where we have a pip just to like push someone out the door. That's not ever a beneficial scenario. So I'm always pushing my leadership team to get really clear in not just what they're expecting, but how they expect them to change and what that demonstration would look like.
I know. I think some leaders are fearful of people leaving the business. And of course, you don't want your best individuals leaving the business, but also giving them feedback is a gift, especially if they're struggling. And they then have the ability to make that choice for themselves and maybe leave the organization and find a role that is better fit for them.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it is. I think we are hitting a point in time where if we're too dependent on AI, we're all just too busy. But I hear it over and over again that feedback, we're lacking in our ability to give feedback.
Yeah. I mean, use AI to your advantage. If that's where you're at, ask it for how can I frame this better? What am I not saying? Ask it to read books, like HR-based books on how you give feedback and how you deal with things very like head on. Train it to be what you need it to be, if that's where you're at from an AI usage perspective. But yeah, at the end of the day, we have to give people real feedback, or especially as leaders, you're not going to get anywhere if the people below you are not performing or not strategic, and it's on you to give them the feedback that elevates the whole organization.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's the time of our episode where we do our POV question. We don't always do this internally when it's just not internally, but when it's just the two of us.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you have a question? We'll start with mine while you think.
Okay, I'll think.
My question is, I think everyone who's listening should think through who at their level they feel is very strategic. Just know who that person is and then watch their behaviors. And if you are leading a team, think through who else you think is strategic at the different levels on your team so that you can recommend and start to recognize those behaviors so you can better explain them.
That's really good homework. I think I'm going to borrow one of the threads that you were on earlier and say, what is the work that you are doing right now that you have not named? And how can you compile it and name it? Look at everything, not just your meetings. What are you doing throughout the next 2 weeks? Take the next 2 weeks on your calendar. What are the meetings you're in to try to solve problems, the work you're doing within a systems or within your enablement work, and how can you stitch it together and at least create one named project for everything you're working on that doesn't exist today. Okay. Yeah. Good advice, Kelly. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been a fun conversation. I'm glad that we get some time, just you and I, to chat through things sometimes too. We get so much insight from leaders we bring on to the podcast that it's good for us to process a lot of this information and themes as well.
It's good to process it, bring it all together. And I learn from you every time we talk. So that's great.
Well, thank you, everyone. If you're not following us on LinkedIn, Apple, or Spotify, any of the socials, please do and give us a rating. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.